This hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee will come to order. Assistant Secretary Leaf, we're glad to get to welcome you in your new role. We're glad you finally made it. And most importantly, we're happy that you're here. Thank you for coming before us today. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Stroll, thank you for coming back to the committee. As I'm sure many know, the Assistant Secretary was our Middle East expert for a while, so we're glad to see her back. I have been asking a simple but important question for some time that I hope this hearing will answer. What is the administration's strategy on Syria? During the last presidential election, Secretary Blinken wrote, quote, "When Joe Biden is president, we will restore U.S. leadership on humanitarian issues." And yet, with the frozen conflict in Syria leading to immense humanitarian, political, and security dilemmas, leadership from the United States or elsewhere seems lacking. Flights to Syria are resuming. Embassies in Damascus are reopening. When Bashar al-Assad landed in the United Arab Emirates in March, he was given a warm welcome as any other head of state would have received, as if he had never ordered a barbaric bombardment of innocent Syrian civilians, as if Assad never ordered chemical weapon attacks that left children gasping for their lives on ventilators. This comes within weeks of new evidence of Syrian atrocities coming to light. Video of Assad's soldiers forcing victims to climb down into a mass grave before massacring them. Think of the message this sends to other dictators around the world who would butcher innocent civilians. You can commit war crimes in broad daylight on camera, and the global community will just shrug its shoulders. This is not lost on Iran. After propping up Assad with billions of dollars, after supporting him with Hezbollah and the Revolutionary Guard Corps, such impunity only fuels Iran's regional aggression. Whether through attacks on U.S. personnel and assets or threatening our allies and partners in Iraq and Jordan, not to mention fueling an active battleground on Israel's border. And it is not lost on Putin. No one who has followed Putin's brutality in Syria for the past decade should be surprised that he is starving and shelling Ukrainians, just as he starved and shelled Syrians. While I have seen the administration's written strategy for Syria as required in the NDAA, which was skeletal from my perspective, I look forward to delving a bit more in detail into the tools and U.S. international political will to execute that strategy. I'd like to hear whether you believe UN Security Council Resolution 2255 has lived up to the path we thought it once could, because it seems the roads we need to be traveling on are crumbling. Earlier this year, in an attempt to free imprisoned extremists, ISIS launched a massive jailbreak in Hasaka. They attacked a Syrian prison with car bombs and gunmen in a battle that lasted more than a week. On top of that, the Assad regime and Hezbollah are manufacturing addictive amphetamine pills called Captagon, effectively turning Syria into a narco state, trafficking the drug throughout Europe and the Middle East to obtain hard currency despite sanctions. And with the UN mandate for cross-border humanitarian aid expiring next month, there is a real question as to whether Russia will support an extension, particularly as the war in Ukraine has ushered in a food crisis that has hit Syria and a number of its neighbors. We need to continue to prioritize our response to this dire humanitarian situation. We must continue to support our partners in Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and across Europe who have absorbed the Syrian refugee community that amounts to 6.8 million people worldwide. Added to this, another 6.7 million who have been displaced within Syria, leaving an entire generation of Syrian children growing up with dim prospects of ever returning home or the possibility of a bright future. So to close, let me lay out what I see as priorities that the U.S. and the international community must continue to hold the Assad regime accountable for its crimes. We need a comprehensive strategy, one that enforces fully the robust set of U.S. sanctions as a means to build leverage that will sharpen Assad's choices and maintain his political isolation. This includes using such sanctions against Assad's benefactors in Moscow and Tehran. It also means sending the clear signal that we cannot tolerate a return to business as usual with Assad and his murderous regime. A strategy would lean in with aggressive U.S. diplomacy to continue to marshal the international community in support of this leverage and to reinvigorate the political process. To this end, I am glad that the NEA Bureau now has an appointed and confirmed leader in you, Assistant Secretary. However, there remain a number of nominees for vital positions in the Middle East that need to move forward, including, crucially for Syria, Tamara Witz as USAID's Assistant Administrator for the Middle East. A U.S. strategy would continue to prioritize bringing its own resources and the resources of the international community to bear on Syria's humanitarian crisis, while being judicious to focus our assistance in ways that doesn't benefit the regime. It would include how to continue to help Syria's neighbors, especially Jordan and Lebanon, who have shown incredible hospitality to those fleeing Assad's brutality, but nevertheless are bearing a significant strain. To that end, we need a full-court press at the United Nations to address a possible Russian veto of the mandate for the last remaining border crossing for desperately needed humanitarian assistance, coupled with a ready-to-implement strategy for pushing that assistance if and when Russia uses its veto. Putin cannot be allowed to hold desperate Syrians as ransom for demands of relief in the Ukrainian context. That strategy should include new consideration of Russia's role in Syria following its invasion of Ukraine and the steps needed to reduce Russian activities while denying Iran and Hezbollah the ability to fill any vacuum created by Russia's preoccupation with Ukraine. It should also address Turkey's role in Syria, taking into consideration its hosting of millions of refugees and its position as a launch point for humanitarian assistance, to its destructive campaigns against our Kurdish partners in the fight against ISIS, including renewed threats to invade northern Syria. It would further flush out steps needed to counter the danger posed by Hezbollah and the Iranian weapons it traffics across Syria. And it should lay out concrete steps to be taken to secure the release of U.S. citizens Austin Tice and Majid Kamelamaz, who have been detained by the Assad regime since 2012 and 2017, respectively. It must provide a path forward that allows unfettered humanitarian access and war crime investigations. And it must provide a long-term legal strategy for ensuring that the horrors that Bashar al-Assad and his regime have inflicted on the Syrian people do not go unanswered. And it should describe how the U.S. can help rally the weight of international pressure on Assad to pursue the political path to unfreeze this conflict. On this, Congress has been clear. We overwhelmingly passed the Syrian Civilian Protection Act, whose primary purpose is to sanction companies or individuals who facilitate Assad's brutality, whether they are doing business with the Syrian government or its security services, providing aircraft or spare parts, and I would like to see the administration use all these tools. We cannot simply allow the regime to return to business as usual. We cannot turn our backs on the Syrian people, and we cannot give up supporting them as so many desperately try to work towards a free and democratic Syria. America's values, its principles, and its reputation on the world stage hang in the balance. With that, let me turn to Senator Risch, the ranking member.